The expedition begins. In the year 23,097 of the Imperial Kin calendar, a distant galaxy buzzed with excitement over an unprecedented expedition. For decades, the galactic community had observed a small blue planet known as Earth, home to a race called humans. This planet, designated P3SH27, was a curious case. Its inhabitants were technologically inferior yet brimming with potential. As whispers of conquest filled the air, one particular family felt the weight of destiny more than others. Among them was Kellen, an ambitious young officer whose adventurous spirit had always set him apart. His older brother, Eric, had become a legend among their people, a daring explorer who sought out new worlds and civilizations. When news broke that a fleet was being assembled to investigate Earth, Kellen felt an overwhelming urge to join him. He believed this mission would not only elevate their status, but also allow him to stand beside his brother once more. The fleet was impressive. One medium capital ship named the Vanguard, 2 light cruisers, 3 frigates, and several troop carriers. Each vessel was equipped with advanced technology far beyond anything Earth could muster. Yet, as they prepared for departure, Kellen couldn't shake off a sense of foreboding that lingered in his mind. As they traveled through space, discussions among the crew revealed differing opinions about their mission. Some viewed it as an opportunity for glory. Others saw it as an act of extermination against a species they deemed unworthy. Kellen found himself torn between admiration for his brother's adventurous spirit and concern over their true intentions. Upon arriving in orbit around Earth, they were greeted by breathtaking views. A vibrant blue planet dotted with swirling clouds and vast landmasses. But what lay beneath those clouds was far more complex than any sensor could reveal. As they began to scan the surface, they discovered fragmented nations engaged in relentless warfare over resources, an endless cycle of conflict that seemed to define humanity. Kellen watched from his post as images flickered across screens, cities ablaze from recent skirmishes, soldiers marching through desolate landscapes, and civilians caught in the crossfire. It was both mesmerizing and horrifying. How could such chaos exist on a world so beautiful? He shared his concerns with Eric during one quiet moment aboard the Vanguard. "Do you think we're making a mistake?" Kellen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eric chuckled softly, brushing off his brother's worries. "Mistakes are part of exploration. We're here to understand them better, perhaps even help them." But deep down, Kellen sensed that their leaders had other plans that involved more than understanding this chaotic world. They were preparing for conquest under the guise of exploration. As days turned into weeks, Kellen's unease grew while they continued monitoring human communications from high orbit. They had learned that these beings communicated through various means, some using devices that emitted sounds while others relied on written symbols or gestures. Yet despite their advanced technology, humanity seemed trapped in cycles of violence and misunderstanding. One fateful day, an urgent transmission crackled through their communication systems, a plea from one faction of humans caught in a brutal conflict. Kellen felt a spark of hope. Perhaps there was still a chance for diplomacy amidst the chaos. "Admiral," Kellen urged during an emergency meeting with command staff, "we should respond. They're asking for help." But Admiral Vrax dismissed his suggestion with a wave of his hand. "Help? They're weak. We must show strength if we are to conquer this world." Kellen's heart sank at those words. He knew then that this expedition would not be about understanding or aiding humanity. It would be about domination, a mission cloaked in righteousness, but driven by greed. As preparations intensify for what was being called Operation Extermination, Kellen found himself grappling with conflicting emotions, loyalty to his brother versus loyalty to his people's mission. He watched as soldiers trained relentlessly for ground combat, while scientists analyzed Earth's atmosphere and gravity, factors that could complicate their invasion plans. With each passing day, Kellen felt increasingly isolated within his own thoughts. He began to question whether he could follow through with this plan when it became clear that many lives would be lost, lives he had hoped to understand rather than extinguish. Finally, after months spent orbiting Earth, the day arrived when their fleet would descend upon its surface. As the Vanguard prepared for landing amidst swirling clouds below, Kellen stood at his station alongside Eric once more, his heart pounding with anticipation mixed with dread. "Ready yourself," Eric said confidently as he adjusted his gear. "We're about to make history." But all Kellen could think about were the lives they were about to disrupt, the families torn apart by war, and whether history would remember them as heroes or monsters. As they broke through the atmosphere into Earth's atmosphere, Kellen felt an overwhelming rush. A mixture of exhilaration and fear washed over him like waves crashing against rocky shores. He gazed out at vast deserts stretching endlessly below them. Their destination lay within those arid lands, where humanity fought fiercely over dwindling resources. Yet even as they descended toward what was supposed to be an easy conquest, Kellen couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling deep within him, a premonition that this mission would not unfold as planned, but rather spiral into something far darker than anyone could foresee: arrival on Earth. As the fleet descended through the swirling clouds of Earth, Kellen's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and dread. The vibrant blue planet below was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment of their ships. The view from the observation deck was breathtaking. Vast oceans stretched out like shimmering blankets, while continents dotted with green and brown beckoned them closer. Yet beneath this beauty lay a world fraught with turmoil and conflict, a reality that Kellen had only begun to comprehend. First impressions. The moment they broke through the cloud cover, the harsh reality of Earth became evident. The capital ship, the Vanguard, hovered over a sprawling desert, its golden sands glistening under the sun. This was not just any desert. It was a battleground for humanity. Kellen could see smoke rising in the distance, remnants of a recent skirmish between rival factions. The sight sent shivers down his spine. "Prepare for landing," Admiral Vrax commanded, his voice steady and authoritative. "We need to establish a base of operations immediately." Kellen exchanged glances with Eric, who stood beside him. They both understood the gravity of their mission. This was not merely an exploration. It was an invasion. As they began their descent, Kellen felt a knot tightening in his stomach. Touchdown. The landing was rough. The ship's thrusters struggled against Earth's gravitational pull. Kellen could hear alarms blaring as the crew worked frantically to stabilize their descent. Finally, with a bone-jarring thud, the Vanguard touched down on the scorched Earth. "Welcome to P3SH27, Eric said dryly, trying to lighten the mood as they unbuckled their harnesses. Once they disembarked, Kellen was struck by the heat enveloping them. The air was thick and dry, filled with the scent of burnt earth and something else, something metallic that hinted at conflict. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Initial reconnaissance. The first order of business was reconnaissance. A small team led by Eric ventured out to survey their surroundings. Kellen joined them, eager to see this world firsthand. As they moved through the desert, they encountered remnants of human civilization. Rusted vehicles abandoned in haste, crumbling structures half buried in sand, and signs of life, both human and animal, struggling to survive in this harsh environment. "Look at this," Eric said, kneeling beside an old vehicle. "They fought hard to defend their homes." Kellen nodded but felt uneasy. But at what cost? "They're destroying themselves." Eric sighed, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps we can help them find another way." But as they continued their exploration, it became clear that any hope for peace would be complicated by the ongoing conflicts among humans. They witnessed skirmishes between factions over resources, water being the most precious commodity in this arid landscape. First contact attempts. Back at the Vanguard, Admiral Vrax ordered attempts at communication with local factions. Kellen watched as messages were broadcasted into the ether, hails sent in various frequencies and languages that had been painstakingly decoded from intercepted transmissions. Days turned into weeks as they waited for a response. Finally, a crackling voice came through their communication devices, a desperate plea from a human faction known as the Coalition of Free Peoples. "We seek allies. We are besieged. Help us." The message echoed through the ship's command center. Kellen felt a surge of hope, but quickly tempered it with caution. He turned to Admiral Vrax, who appeared unmoved by the urgency in the human's voice. "Admiral," Kellen urged, "we should respond. This could be our chance to establish trust." Vrax's expression hardened. "Trust? They're fighting among themselves. We cannot afford to show weakness." Kellen clenched his fists in frustration, but knew better than to challenge his superior openly. Instead, he sought out Eric later that night. "We can't just sit here while they suffer," Kellen insisted as they gazed out at the stars from the observation deck. Eric placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll find our moment. Just wait." The dark side of humanity. As days passed without further contact from Earth's factions, Kellen began to delve deeper into human history through data logs collected by their probes before landing. What he discovered shocked him. Centuries of warfare driven by greed and ideology had left scars across this planet. He learned about world wars fought over territory and resources, genocides committed in the name of supremacy, and revolutions sparked by oppression. Each entry painted a picture of humanity's darkest impulses, an endless cycle of violence that seemed impossible to break. "How can they live like this?" Kellen muttered one evening while reviewing data with Eric. "They're resilient," Eric replied thoughtfully. "But they need guidance, someone to show them another way." Kellen admired his brother's optimism, but couldn't shake off his growing concern about their mission's true purpose. Was it really about helping these people or merely exploiting them for resources? A sudden change. Just when Kellen thought things couldn't get any more complicated, an unexpected event shook their camp one night. A sudden attack from unknown assailants who had been watching them from afar. Explosions rocked the Vanguard, sending crew members scrambling for cover as chaos erupted around them. Kellen grabbed his weapon and rushed outside with Eric, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Stay close," Eric shouted as they moved toward the source of the explosions. What they found left them stunned. A group of humans armed with makeshift weapons had infiltrated their camp, believing them to be yet another faction seeking dominance over their territory. "We won't let you take our land," one human shouted defiantly as he raised his weapon toward them. Kellen raised his hands in surrender, desperate to avoid further bloodshed. "Wait, we're not your enemy." But before he could explain further, another explosion rocked the area, a reminder that misunderstandings could lead to devastating consequences. A new understanding. In that moment of chaos and confusion, something shifted within Kellen. He realized that if they were ever going to make progress on Earth, it would require more than just brute force. It would demand understanding and empathy toward these beings who had endured so much suffering. As he looked into the eyes of those humans, fearful yet determined, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility wash over him. Perhaps this mission could become something more than extermination. Perhaps it could be an opportunity for cooperation instead. With newfound resolve coursing through him, Kellen turned back toward the Vanguard, ready to fight not just for conquest, but for a chance at redemption, for both himself and humanity itself. The plan unfolds. As the dust settled from the chaotic skirmish at the Vanguard, Kellen felt a sense of urgency wash over him. The attack had been a wake-up call, revealing the raw fear and desperation of the humans they had come to conquer. He stood on the observation deck, staring out at the vast desert landscape, contemplating their next steps. The mission was supposed to be straightforward, but now it felt like they were stepping into a quagmire. The Admiral's strategy. Admiral Vrax summoned the crew for an emergency meeting to discuss their strategy moving forward. Kellen and Eric took their seats among the officers, tension palpable in the air. Vrax's demeanor was resolute as he laid out his plan for the next phase of their operation. "We will establish a stronghold here in this desert," Vrax declared, pointing to a holographic map of the area. "From there, we will launch coordinated strikes against the human factions. Our goal is to eliminate any resistance quickly." Kellen's heart sank at those words. Admiral, we need to consider a different approach. These humans are not just mindless creatures. They have fought for survival against each other for centuries. Vrax's eyes narrowed. We do not have time for empathy. Kellen, we must show strength. If we hesitate, we risk losing everything. Eric leaned closer to Kellen, whispering, we need to find a way to make them see us as allies instead of enemies. Internal conflicts. As preparations for the ground invasion began, Kellen found himself increasingly at odds with Vrax's aggressive tactics. He spent sleepless nights pondering how they could turn this conflict into something more meaningful. During one of these restless nights, he confided in Eric. What if we could communicate with them? Show them that we are not here to destroy, but to help. Kellen suggested. Eric nodded thoughtfully. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. If we can gain their trust, perhaps we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. They decided to gather intelligence on human communication methods and cultures, hoping to find a way to bridge the gap between their two species. Kellen spent hours studying intercepted transmissions and analyzing human behaviors from afar. Gathering intelligence. Kellen and Eric organized a small team of linguists and cultural experts aboard the Vanguard. They worked tirelessly to decode human languages and understand their social structures. The more they learned, the more fascinated Kellen became by humanity's complexity. Did you know that humans have different languages based on regions? One linguist remarked during a briefing. Some even have dialects that vary within the same country. Kellen listened intently as they discussed various factions and their motivations. It became clear that humanity was not a monolithic entity. They were divided into numerous groups with conflicting ideologies and goals. Perhaps we should reach out to one of these factions, Eric suggested during one discussion. If we can find a group that is open to cooperation, a risky proposition. After much deliberation, Kellen proposed an audacious plan. Send a small contingent of their best diplomats and scientists to make contact with one of the less hostile human factions, known as the Coalition of Free Peoples. This group had been fighting against oppressive regimes and seemed more inclined toward collaboration than conflict. Admiral Vrax will never agree to this, Eric warned. Kellen knew he had to convince him somehow. He arranged a meeting with Vrax, presenting his findings and advocating for diplomacy over violence. Admiral, Kellen began earnestly, the coalition is struggling against tyranny. If we offer them our support, our technology, they may see us as allies rather than invaders. Vrax listened but remained skeptical. And what if they turn on us? We cannot afford such risks. We have already seen what happens when we approach with weapons drawn, Kellen countered passionately. This is our chance to change the narrative, gaining approval. After much back and forth debate, Vrax reluctantly agreed to allow a small delegation to make contact with the coalition, on the condition that they would be heavily armed and prepared for any eventuality. Kellen felt a rush of hope mixed with anxiety as he prepared for this pivotal mission. He gathered his team, linguists, scientists, and soldiers, who shared his vision of cooperation rather than conquest. As they boarded one of the smaller ships designed for reconnaissance missions, Kellen looked back at the Vanguard, feeling both excitement and trepidation about what lay ahead. First contact. The journey through Earth's atmosphere was turbulent but exhilarating. As they descended toward a designated meeting point near a coalition encampment, Kellen's heart raced with anticipation. Upon landing, they were met by wary eyes. Humans armed with makeshift weapons stood at attention, clearly unsure of what to expect from these alien visitors. Kellen stepped forward, raising his hands in peace. "We come in friendship," he called out in English, a language he had practiced extensively during their preparations. A figure stepped forward from among the humans, a woman with fierce determination etched across her face. "Why should we trust you?" she demanded. Kellen felt the weight of her words but pressed on. "We are not here to conquer or destroy. We want to help you fight against oppression." Building trust. The woman eyed him skeptically but gestured for her people to lower their weapons slightly. "Help. How can we trust that you won't turn on us like others have?" Kellen took a deep breath, knowing this was his moment to prove their intentions were genuine. He explained their mission, how they had observed humanity from afar, and wanted nothing more than to assist in ending cycles of violence. As he spoke passionately about hope for collaboration and mutual benefit, he could see some skepticism begin to fade from her expression. "Your technology could change everything," she said slowly, glancing back at her people who were still uncertain but intrigued. "A fragile alliance." After hours of discussions filled with cautious optimism, an agreement was reached. Kellen's team would provide technological support in exchange for information about human conflicts and alliances. As they returned to the Vanguard, Kellen felt buoyed by what had transpired. A fragile alliance had begun forming between two vastly different species united by a common goal: survival against tyranny. Yet even as hope blossomed within him, he couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that this newfound partnership would be put to the test sooner than expected. The battle begins. The fragile alliance between the aliens and the coalition of free peoples had sparked a glimmer of hope in Kellen's heart. Yet, as they prepared for their first joint operation, he couldn't shake the feeling that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The coalition had informed them of a significant threat looming over their territory: a powerful warlord named General Thorn, who sought to dominate all factions and was known for his ruthless tactics. Preparing for war. In the days that followed their initial contact, Kellen and Eric worked tirelessly alongside their new human allies. They shared knowledge about technology, strategy, and tactics, hoping to level the playing field against General Thorn's forces. The coalition's leaders were eager to learn about the aliens' advanced weaponry and defensive systems, while Kellen was equally fascinated by human ingenuity in crafting makeshift weapons from limited resources. "Here," a young human engineer named Mara said, holding up a crude but effective explosive device made from scrap metal and chemicals. "We can use these to disrupt Thorn's supply lines." Kellen marveled at her creativity. "It's impressive what you can do with so little," he admitted, feeling a newfound respect for humanity's resourcefulness. As they finalized their plans, Kellen felt a sense of camaraderie growing between the two species. They were no longer just aliens and humans. They were allies united against a common enemy. The first skirmish. The day of their first joint operation arrived. Kellen stood at the command center of the Vanguard, surrounded by both alien officers and human leaders. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as they prepared to intercept General Thorn's supply convoy. "Remember," Kellen addressed the assembled troops, "our goal is to disrupt their operations without unnecessary bloodshed. We want to show them that cooperation is possible." As they deployed into the field, Kellen couldn't help but feel nervous. He had trained for combat, but never expected to be leading a mixed force into battle against an enemy as formidable as Thorn. The convoy came into view, a line of armored vehicles moving cautiously through the desert. Kellen signaled for his team to take positions along the route, utilizing both alien technology and human tactics. The plan was simple: ambush the convoy, cut off its escape routes, and capture key supplies. Chaos erupts. As they launched their attack, chaos erupted. Explosions rocked the desert as Mara's devices detonated among Thorn's vehicles, sending debris flying in all directions. Kellen fought alongside his human allies, using his advanced weaponry to cover their advance. "Push forward," he shouted, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he fired at approaching enemy soldiers. But as they pressed on, it became clear that General Thorn was not easily defeated. His forces retaliated fiercely, armed with heavy weaponry and fortified positions. Kellen watched in horror as several coalition fighters fell under enemy fire. "Fall back. Regroup," he yelled, realizing that their initial advantage was slipping away. A turning point. Just when it seemed like defeat was imminent, Eric stepped forward with a bold plan. "We need to flank them. If we can draw their attention away from our main force." Kellen nodded in agreement. We'll create a diversion. Mara, can you set up another explosive near those rocks? Mara nodded quickly, her determination shining through despite the chaos surrounding them. As she worked on her device, Kellen led a small group around the enemy's flank while Eric held their ground. With a deafening explosion that sent shockwaves through the battlefield, Mara's device detonated among Thorn's troops, creating confusion and panic. Seizing the moment, Kellen charged forward alongside his team. "Now, push," he shouted as they surged into the fray. Unexpected allies. In the midst of battle, Kellen spotted a familiar face among the enemy ranks, one of Thorn's lieutenants who had once been part of the coalition, but had defected for power and wealth. It was a decision that had cost him dearly. Now he fought against his former comrades. "Jarek," Kellen called out as he confronted him on the battlefield. "You don't have to do this. Join us again." Jarek sneered but hesitated for a moment. "You think I'd go back? I've tasted power." Kellen saw doubt flicker in Jarek's eyes and pressed on. "Power comes from unity. Look at what we're fighting for. Freedom from tyranny." Just then, an explosion shook the ground nearby, causing Jarek to stumble back. In that brief moment of vulnerability, Kellen seized his chance. "Join us," he urged again. To his surprise, Jarek lowered his weapon slightly. Maybe you're right," he muttered before turning away from battle altogether. A new strategy. With Jarek's defection causing further disarray among Thorn's forces, Kellen rallied his troops for one final push. They regrouped with Eric and Mara at a vantage point overlooking the battlefield. "We need to take out Thorn himself," Eric declared firmly. "If we eliminate him, we can dismantle this entire operation." Kellen nodded in agreement but felt uneasy about confronting such a powerful adversary directly. "It won't be easy. He'll be heavily guarded." Mara chimed in with determination in her voice. "We can use guerrilla tactics. Distract them while we sneak in." As night fell over the desert landscape, they formulated their plan under the cover of darkness, stealthily infiltrating Thorn's camp while creating diversions elsewhere. The final confrontation. Underneath a blanket of stars twinkling overhead, Kellen led a small team toward Thorn's stronghold, a heavily fortified compound surrounded by guards and defenses. With each step closer to their target, tension mounted within him. They moved silently through shadows until they reached the perimeter fence. Using alien technology combined with human ingenuity, they disabled security systems one by one until they were inside. As they approached Thorn's command center, a tent filled with maps and communication devices, Kellen felt his heart pounding in anticipation of what lay ahead. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the camp as guards rushed toward them. "We've been spotted," Eric shouted as they prepared for an inevitable confrontation. A fight for freedom. The ensuing battle was fierce. Kellen fought alongside Eric and Mara against overwhelming odds. But this time felt different. Their training together had forged an unbreakable bond between them. With every enemy soldier they took down together, hope surged within him that freedom was within reach, not just for themselves, but for all those oppressed by General Thorn's tyranny. Finally cornering Thorn himself amidst chaos and destruction in his command tent, Kellen confronted him directly. "You've caused enough suffering," Kellen shouted as he aimed his weapon at Thorn's chest. Thorn laughed darkly but faltered when he saw Jarek standing beside Kellen. Once an ally turned enemy, now turned back again. "You think you can defeat me?" Thorn sneered defiantly even as fear flickered across his face. "Yes," Kellen replied firmly. "Together we will." With one swift motion fueled by years of oppression suffered by countless innocents under Thorn's rule, Kellen pulled the trigger. Victory and reflection. As silence fell over the battlefield following Thorn's defeat, a collective sigh of relief washed over both aliens and humans alike. The realization set in. They had achieved something remarkable together. Amidst cheers erupting from coalition fighters celebrating their hard-fought victory, Kellen looked around at his comrades. Eric standing tall beside him along with Mura, who wore an expression filled with pride, and felt gratitude swell within him for having found allies where once there had only been enemies. "We did it," Eric said breathlessly as adrenaline coursed through him still from battle excitement, mingling with disbelief at what they'd accomplished together against all odds. Kellen nodded slowly. This victory marked not just success over tyranny, but also hope for future cooperation between two worlds once divided by fear and misunderstanding. Chance at redemption, not only for humanity, but also for themselves as explorers seeking understanding beyond mere conquest. And so began a new chapter, not just on Earth, but across galaxies yet unexplored, where unity could triumph over division, and where every life mattered regardless of origin.